All right. Hi, everyone. I'm David, and I'm here to share with you some information on one of America's most underrated Black women activists, who we know as Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson. So I want to give you the most efficient background story I can, given my time constraints, and I'll just assume you've never heard of her before today. So Marsha P. Johnson was a trans woman given the original name Malcolm Michaels Jr. She was born in New Jersey in 1945, but moved to New York to be a drag queen and a sex worker. She came out as gay shortly after moving to New York, and at the time, the term transgender didn't exist yet. So she identified as a gay transvestite drag queen, and she used her pronouns. Regardless of the terms we used to label her, being both Black and trans in the 60s meant she would face endless discrimination. She was present at the Stonewall riots, which I'll speak more about later, and she mostly served as an LGBTQ plus activist. And we didn't really cover LGBTQ plus activism extensively in this course, but I firmly believe that LGBTQ plus activism and racial justice activism go hand in hand. So I consider her just to be an overall activist. So we learned about at least a dozen of America's most influential Black women activists this semester. And I assume that most of my classmates would have chosen a Rosa Parks or a Harriet Tubman for this project. And I can't blame them because there's a lot of substantial research to be done on those women. However, I wanted to think outside the box and shed some light on another amazing woman. Marsha P. Johnson is a great representation for civil rights activism because she never stopped fighting, despite the seemingly insurmountable odds stacked against her. When I say this, I'm referring to the discrimination that both Black individuals and LGBTQ plus individuals dealt with at this time in history. So for now, I just want to talk about what she did for racial justice. I've been reading as much as I can about her life over the past days, and I found her influence spread beyond just her small community. Um, she urged people to not only fight for trans lives like hers, but to fight for all Black lives. And just last year, there was a march of 15,000 people protesting the murder of two Black trans women. And I believe that they were following the path that Marsha laid down decades ago. This recent march is inspirational to me because people of all races, genders, and sexualities united together against hate. And this relates directly to Marsha P. Johnson's influence because she was one of the first people to do it. She lived during the Black freedom movement and was very active during it. I would say that she paved the way for civil rights activists of today, especially Black Lives Matter. She was definitely ahead of her time, and I think it's great that people recognize the impact she has had, but I think it's more important to say her name and teach about her. She was an example of the intersectionality between the queer experience and the Black experience before intersectionality was really a thing. Being a minority in so many ways and being confident in her identity wasn't easy, but she did it anyway. I just think that there are certain individuals who served as great role models during their lives, and she was one of them who still inspires people today. So now I'll move on to the specific ways in which she was an LGBTQ plus activist. As I previously mentioned, Marsha P. Johnson was a member of the LGBTQ plus community because she was a trans woman. She actively fought for LGBTQ plus rights, most specifically gay and trans rights. She was present at the Stonewall incident in 1969, where activists rioted against police in New York who raided a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn. The movie Happy Birthday, Marsha shows her as the first person to initiate the violence, but she denied that to be true because she said she got there around 2 in the morning and the place was already on fire. However, there were multiple reports saying that she climbed up a light pole and dropped a brick onto a police car's windshield. So even though she wasn't the one who started the riot, she gets more credit than anybody else because of the things that she did following the event. In the days after Stonewall, she and Sylvia Rivera led marches to protest police brutality. The two of them also formed the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, which was an organization that fought against police brutality that occurred before, during, and after the Stonewall riots. The mission of STAR was to help Black and queer homeless people. So they paid the bails to get their sisters out of prison because they were wrongfully incarcerated and many of them couldn't afford their own bail. And Johnson and Rivera also formed the STAR House, which is for homeless trans youth, which I think is amazing. Um, She also became known as the first trans saint by the LGBTQ plus community. My favorite thing about Marsha P. Johnson is the way her legacy was preserved following her death, because it says a lot about the impact that she had on her community. In July of 1992, her body was found in the Hudson River. After absolutely no investigation, the police wrote it off as a suicide, but many people thought it was actually a murder. So people who were close to her demanded that the police investigate the case, because witnesses reported seeing four men beating Marsha at the bridge that day. So many people came to her funeral that the police couldn't stop them from marching. Um, and the police decided to change the label of her death to cause unknown instead of suicide. But this wasn't enough to satisfy people. So people protested for years. And finally, in 2012, the police reopened the case. And this could never bring Marsha back, but it was worth fighting for someone who is such an icon for their community. Black trans women who have never met Marsha P. Johnson were fighting for justice even 20 years after her death. And that's a great example of how big her impact was on the Black LGBTQ plus community, specifically Black trans community. I think that Marsha P. Johnson's activism could be really useful today, but even though she's no longer with us, we have tangible evidence of the mark she made on history. She was incredibly open about her identity, even though she knew she would face discrimination. She was not only Black and not only gay, but she was also a trans woman, a sex worker, and HIV positive at a time where it was wrong to be any one of those things. She really paved the way for the RuPauls of today, who deal with the intersectionality between a Black identity and a queer identity every single day. Marsha P. Johnson's activism is still relevant and still inspires both our LGBTQ plus community and our Black community, because she was one of the first to push for Black trans rights. So that's all I have for you on Marsha P. No Mind Johnson. Thanks for watching.